Howdy, everyone. All right, well, obviously, I've got both canopy pieces back up on the airframe, and I just want to go over a couple of more observations and things to think about before you get into cutting your canopy. So, in my last video, I had mentioned something about the temperature outside, and I had said that I would come back to that at a later point. So, I'm going to talk about that real quick. Vans recommends that you do your cutting in warm temperatures to help prevent cracking. And I think that's great advice. Obviously, if the plastic is a little bit more soft, the chances of it cracking are a little bit less. The only thing that I question in my mind is I just wonder how big of a difference temperature makes. I cut this canopy when it was in the mid 80s, the couple of times that I've been outside cutting it. And obviously, it's fine. I just wonder if there would have been much of a difference if I had cut it when it was 70 degrees. What if I were to wait and do my cuts when it's 100 degrees? Would there be that much of a difference? I don't know. I'm just making an observation or I'm questioning how big of a temperature difference do you need to actually make a difference in the cut? I could see if it was minus 20 degrees compared to positive 85 degrees. But I just wonder, standard summer temperatures here, between 75 and 85 degrees, does that matter? I don't know. But bottom line is, Vans recommends cutting the canopy when it's warm. I highly recommend that you cut the canopy when it's warm. I cut my canopy while it was warm, and it came out just fine. So that's that. Okay, getting back to somewhat important stuff. So again, doing my typical kind of put the canopy in place and kind of shimmy it and wiggle it around a little bit, let it kind of find its the way that it wants to sit, let it nest the way that it wants to, so to speak. Again, my alignment mark lined up very, very close. I just went ahead and shifted it so it would line up. It was close enough that I'm not going to worry about it. If it had been off 3/4 of an inch one way or the other, I would have been concerned, but it was only off like maybe an eighth, 3/16. And it now fits a lot better along the roll bar. And Van speaks of this in the instructions. When this is a solid piece, it rests however you do your initial trim. It sits on the skin here. And however you do your initial trim in the back, it sits on the skin here. And it kind of bridges over the roll bar area here. With that in mind, this is why I was not overly concerned about making this cut. I drew it on the canopy using a straight edge, and then as you saw in the video, I did the actual cut by hand without any guides or anything to make sure that this line was perfectly straight. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, to get this absolutely perfectly straight right out of the gate is very, 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 very difficult. Two, after you make that perfectly awesome straight cut, you have to come back and clean up these edges. Depending on how you clean up those edges, that's going to probably introduce a little bit of a waviness. If you use anything that's round, that spins to clean off these edges, you're probably going to end up making it kind of wavy. And I'm talking about something round that spins in this direction. I'm not talking about having a flat disc in this direction, but even so, when you go to sand your absolutely perfectly straight cut, you're probably going to introduce a little bit of waviness. The other reason why I wasn't too concerned about doing it freehand is because, as I said, when you've got this as one piece, it bridges across the roll bar and it doesn't sit down against the roll bar. Once you make the cut and you separate these into two pieces, obviously the canopy now can only rest on this. So the canopy as a whole in the back will kind of squat. It will now sit lower because it's resting on here instead of resting all the way back here. So when that happens, you made your mark with it bridged. So it was in one orientation. And now that it's been cut and it's been able to sit, your cut is now going to be slightly angled. And you can see that just a little bit on the canopy, which is it's really not that bad on mine. I'm actually quite pleased with it. But it's very obvious on the window part, the back half here. You can see how this is opened up. You can see that this is a good, way down here at the bottom, it's almost a good inch apart. I've got my reference line lined up here with the fuselage. I've got my reference line up here lined up with the line on the canopy itself, and I've got them just about touching here. But as you come around, as you come down the seam, you see it opens up a lot. And I planned for that. You can see how much material I left between the aluminum skin here and the actual plexiglass here. You can see how much material I left all the way around. And I did that because I knew that something like this could happen. So in order to bring this forward to mate with the canopy, this whole thing is going to have to be shifted forward. And I've got plenty of material here to do that. I can shift this forward a good 1.5 inches to take care of this gap. So when I do that, of course, I shift this whole window forward, close up this gap. That means I have to gradually take material off of it as I come across, because this is already touching. This is now kind of in the way, so I have to start cutting this back so I can shift this forward and close up this gap. So if I would have taken hours to make this absolutely perfect initial cut, it would have been a complete waste of time, because I still have to alter this piece to get it to fit right. And that may or may not be the case with everybody. Perhaps it would be best for some, depending on how that cut comes out. Maybe this would actually be really, really super close, and you have to modify the cut on the canopy. But every situation is going to be mildly different. My point is, don't get hung up on this, what they call the big cut. It's really not that big of a deal. It just wasn't. I don't know what else to say. It was a complete non-event, and you can see in the video that I didn't use any fancy jigging or anything. I just made up my my wood contraption to kind of hold it in place to keep it from moving around, and then I cut it freehand. Now that it's been separated, I can start working on the details. I'm going to take this, find a safe place for it, and keep it out of the way. I'm going to work on this front canopy first. But now that I've got them separated, this is going to start to sit where it's going to want to sit permanently. And I can start doing my very fine finesse trimming to get it just right, get it the best that I can. Also keep in mind, this front area has not been trimmed to its final trimming. So these side areas here still hang down too low. These are going to have to be trimmed up on both sides. I am not going to do that yet. I'm going to take care of this first, because as I trim this, the canopy is going to continue to lower as I take material off here. Granted, it won't be that much, but it will continue to sink. Obviously, when the canopy sinks, it's going to change the trim that I need to do along this side, and it's going to change how this back edge lines up with the roll bar. Now, I could do it backwards. Since this is so close to where I had originally had it laid out on my cut line, I could, in effect, but get this cut exactly perfect lined up with my reference line on the roll bar and work off of that. Fixture this in place after I get it perfectly straight and smooth. Fix this down, then trim the front, and then trim the sides. I could do that, but I think what I'll do is I think I'll trim the front first, get it as perfect as I can, and then work on the back bow, get that as perfect as I can get it. Then the canopy will kind of be, it will sit height-wise where it will permanently. And then at that point I can go ahead and trim the sides. So again, I apologize for the long-winded yabble babble, but I just want to make sure I get things covered. And, you know, like I've said before, I don't know my entire audience. I don't know what kind of skill sets people have, what kind of mindset they're coming from, how much experience they have. So I kind of go overboard sometimes trying to explain something simple. I apologize for that. So let me get to work on some more trimming, and I'll talk to you guys here shortly.